The desert didn't burn the way he remembered. In 1991, the sky over Kuwait had been a smear of black smoke and orange fire. Oil wells screamed flames into the air, and the ground shook under tracks and artillery. That desert had smelled like burning plastic and diesel and fear. This one just smelled hot. The sun hammered the scrubland in vertical white sheets, turning the distant hills into shimmering ghosts. A dry wind swept powdery dust across the M1 Abrams that sat motionless in the field, its dark green hull crouched behind a shallow berm like a dead animal too heavy to bury. Inside, the tank was a tomb. Nothing, Specialist Ortiz muttered, thumb punching the power button again on his blank gunner's primary sight. No thermal, no day sight, no backup, no, I got zip LT. Lieutenant J. Park sat in the commander's seat, helmet crooked, eyes tight with exhaustion and something that was very close to panic. He tapped his gloved fingers against the edge of the dead display, as if impatience alone might wake it. "Loader," Park called. "Anything." "Turret controls dead, sir," said Private First Class Miller from his spot under the breech. "Hydraulics are offline. I got manual traverse, but she's heavy as sin." At the driver's station, Novak craned his neck back, sweat making pale trails through the dust on his face. AUX power unit won't start. Turbine won't crank. It's all fried, like someone pulled the plug on a skyscraper. "Comms?" Park asked. Ortiz reached up to the sinker's panel and tapped a few keys. "Nothing but static, boss." Same as last 10 tries. They were alone on the net, alone in the field. Park took a slow breath, trying to keep his voice level. Okay, we troubleshoot. It's a system failure. We got redundancy for." A distant boom rolled over them, just enough to rattle dust from the interior walls. The men flinched instinctively. "Was that one of ours?" Miller asked. "Didn't sound like artillery," Ortiz said. He listened for more, head tilted. There was only the dry hiss of the wind sandblasting the tank's hull. They were supposed to be part of Hammer 2, 2nd Platoon, pushing through the broken industrial belt on the edge of a nameless city. The briefing had called it a stability operation. Then someone on the other side had started using loitering drones and improvised mines smart enough to recognize a tank signature. The Abrams had hit something. Not a conventional mine, not an RPG. Just 1 second, everything was fine, and the next the interior of the turret had been lit white with static, a wave of invisible force washing through every wire and circuit. System's flicker died. The turbine coughed and spun down. The screens went black. The tank didn't explode. It just stopped. EMP. Novak had guessed. Localized jammer? Micro-drone strike on the power distribution. Ortiz argued. Park hadn't said anything. He just called it in. Except now their radios didn't work. And nobody had come. "Sir," Miller said, voice low, "if we're mobility killed out here in the open..." "We're not mobility killed yet." Park snapped more sharply than he meant to. He swallowed, trying to soften it. "We're just rebooting. It's a glitch. The rest of the company is probably circling back." He did not believe that. Every minute they sat here, without power, without comms, without eyes, they might as well have painted a target on their backs. Another boom. Closer this time. Novak's eyes flicked to the hatch above him. "LT," Ortiz said quietly. "With all due respect, we're blind and deaf in enemy territory. Can we at least..." A sharp rap on the side of the turret made all 4 of them jump. Everyone froze. 3 heavy knocks, right above the loader's position, metal on metal. Not a random clank, deliberate. Miller's hand shot for the pistol strapped to the wall beside him. "Belay that," Park hissed. "Nobody fires inside the tank." He reached for his own sidearm anyway. Old habits. Another trio of knocks. A muffled voice yelled from outside, distorted by the hull. "Hammer 2-6, you alive in there?" The relief was such a sharp surge that Park's vision grayed for half a second. Friendly voice. American English. Calm in that particular way that came from too many years of seeing too many bad things. "Yeah," Park shouted up, hand already on the handle of his hatch. "Yeah, we're..." The handle didn't move. He frowned, twisted harder, feeling the stubborn resistance. The hatch was unlocked. It should move. "Driver's hatch is jammed, too," Novak muttered. Thought it was just me. Hold up, the voice outside called. The knocking moved, boots scrabbling on the hull. Something's magnetizing your exterior. Some clowns got fancy toys out here. Miller glanced up, eyes wide. Sir, who is that? The boots thudded overhead, then shifted again. All right, I'm coming the hard way. Don't shoot me. I'm too damn old to die cleaning up after lieutenants. There was a thunk, then the screech of metal under force. A narrow lance of light knifed into the dim interior of the turret as the loader's hatch cracked open an inch. Dust motes floated like tiny planets in the sudden brightness. A brown, weathered hand forced fingers through the gap, gripping the underside of the hatch and heaving. Muscles bunched under an old, faded tattoos, a winged saber's design, and beneath it, a crude scrawl that read Hell on Tracks. The hatch groaned and rose another inch, then another. A face appeared, squinting into the dark. He looked like he'd been carved out of leather left too long in the sun. Deep lines etched his cheeks and brow. His hair, buzzed short, was salt and pepper beneath a dusty Kevlar helmet. A gray mustache framed a mouth set in a line that might once have been a smile, given enough time. He had an old tanker's poise, even hanging half in, half out of the hatch like that, as if the cramped turret was his natural habitat. Which one of you jokers is in charge? He asked. Park cleared his throat. Lieutenant Park. Tank commander. Who are you, sir? The older man snorted softly, as if the sir amused him. Name's Kincaid. I'm with the advisory element for Combined Task Force Valor. You boys seem to have misplaced your war. He inhaled through his nose, expression crinkling. In your air freshener, Miller muttered. It's just us in here, man. Give it 10 more minutes, and we'll be ripe enough to qualify as a biological weapon. Kincaid's eyes flicked around the turret in a quick, practice scan, taking in the dead screens, the slack power switches, the motionless gun. When his gaze settled back on Park, it was sharper. Systems offline? All of them, Park said. We took some kind of field effect. Everything popped and died. I've tried cold starts, reboots, power cycles. Nothing. Kincaid considered that. Any sound before it died? Whining, grinding alarms. Static, Ortiz said quietly. White out, like all the speakers screaming at once. And it tasted like pennies. He made a face. Sorry. Weird detail. Kincaid gave him another quick, unreadable glance, then nodded. Electric taste. Copper on your tongue. Yeah, I've seen that before. Park frowned. In Iraq, Kincaid's eyes flicked to him. For a heartbeat, they held more years than made sense, more deserts than just this one. Different sand, Kincaid said. Same smell. He hauled himself fully inside, boots dropping with a solid thump onto the turret floor. All right, Lieutenant Park. You say your Abrams is dead in the field. Yes, sir, Kincaid. But it's not. He tilted his head. It's just sleeping. Somebody cut its brainstem. But the muscles are still good. I told you the hydraulics, Miller started. Hydraulics are for people who like comfort, Kincaid said. What you've got is a thoroughly modern machine that forgot it's also a very old machine. He brushed dust off a panel near Park's right knee. Mind if I drive? Park bristled, habit colliding with desperation. I'm the tank commander. I can't just. Look around, son, Kincaid said softly without heat. How long has it been since you heard another friendly voice on the net? Park swallowed. 40 minutes. Maybe 50. Kincaid grunted. They either left you or they're licking their own wounds. Either way, anyone hunting that unit will follow the tracks and the smoke. He tapped an invisible map in the air. When they do, what do you want to be? A target. He gestured to the dead screens. Or a gun. Ortiz glanced at Park. Sir, if he can get us moving. Park met Kincaid's gaze. You're not in our chain of command. Nope, Kincaid agreed. I'm older than your entire platoon's cumulative experience, and I have a bad coffee habit. That's it. His voice hardened. But I've seen what happens when a tank crew waits for permission instead of acting. You don't want that story. Were you armor? Novak asked suddenly from below. Kincaid's mouth twitched. 35 years in tracks and turrets. Abrams since she rolled off the line. I was in the desert before you were born, kid. When the first M1s came over, we called them starships. Your fancy electronics? Window dressing. Underneath, she's still steel, hoses, gears. That part doesn't break as easy. Park felt the weight of 3 other sets of eyes on him. His crew waiting. Kincaid extended a hand, palm up, finger steady. You can call me whatever you want, Lieutenant. Tourist. Dinosaur. Pain in the ass. But for the next few hours, his voice dropped. If you want to live, you call me Tank Commander. The words hung in the hot, stale air of the turret. Park's jaw clenched. In any other context, he might have argued. He might have cited regs, doctrine, chain of command. But none of those had answers for a dead Abrams in a silent desert with unknown threats closing in. He thought of the last thing their company commander had said on the net before everything went white and quiet. If we get separated, you act. Not react. Act. Park took a breath, then another. Fine, he said, and it came out hoarse. He swallowed and tried again. Fine. For now, you have command of this tank. He pressed his own commander's headset into Kincaid's hands. It felt heavier than it should. Good call, Kincaid said quietly, slipping the headset on. His shoulders seemed to settle into the turret as if returning home. When he spoke again, his voice was crisp. All right, crew. New rules. You talk short, you move fast, and you don't do anything dumb unless I specifically order it, and then it's my dumb thing, not yours. We clear. A yes, sir, Miller said. Yes, sir, Novak echoed from the bow. Kincaid's eyes flicked to Ortiz. Gunner. Yes, sir, Ortiz said, trying to sound like he did this every day. Good. Now, let's wake her up. He started with things the younger men barely recognized. See this, Kincaid said, kneeling on the turret floor and prying off a scuffed metal plate with a multi-tool. This is an access panel to a world before USB ports. Underneath, cables and connectors lurked, bundled, and clipped, dust sifting down around them. Kincaid traced a line of wiring with a finger, nodded to himself, then unclipped one connector and jammed a bypass lead into another. Ortiz watched, fascinated. That's not in any of the manuals we had at Fort Hood. Of course it's not, Kincaid said. They put this stuff in the classified annex, then lost the annex under a pile of PowerPoints about network-centric warfare. He reached up, wrapped the inert thermal sight. Whole damn army fell in love with screens. Forgot every screen's just a window. And windows break. He cracked another panel loose, exposing rows of switches that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a frontline tank. Analog backup bus, he said. Direct to the actuators. No software, just raw signals. We used it once when lightning hit our tank in '91. His lips quirked in a humorless half-smile. We were so proud we didn't die, we wrote the story on the turret in grease pencil. What happened? Miller asked. Kincaid didn't look up. We killed a tank that shouldn't have been there. His hand hesitated on a switch, just barely, then moved on. Friendly. Long story. Wrong map. Wrong call signs. Wrong night. He flicked the switch. We'll save that one for when you're old enough to drink. The turret lights flickered once, like a dying firefly, then steadied to a dim amber glow. Whoa, Novak breathed from below. We got power? Partial, Kincaid said, rerouting from the battery bank. You got instruments yet, driver? Novak prodded his panel. I've got analog gauges. Turbine readouts are faint, but there. No main digital display. Fuel levels showing 90%. She's full up. That's something. Kincaid clapped the side of the turret. We're going to spin that turbine up the old-fashioned way. No electronic throttle. Novak, I want you to put your hand on the fuel shutoff lever. No, lower that one, and be ready to feather it if she screams. Screams, Novak repeated. That a technical term, sir. You'll know it when you hear it. Kincaid slid into the commander's station, fingers moving confidently over the controls. He reached into a recess Ortiz had never even thought to check and pulled out a stubby, scarred key attached to the hull by a steel cable. They didn't show you this at the schoolhouse, I bet, he said. No, sir, Ortiz admitted. That's because back when I learned this, the instructors told us, treat this like the Ark of the Covenant. Don't look directly at it. He slid the key into a nearly invisible slot and turned. A low mechanical growl started somewhere beneath their feet. The men held their breath. The growl rose to a whine, then a high-pitched whir. The turbine coughed once, twice. Then, With a roar like a jet engine remembering what it was born to do, the AGT-1500 came to life. The tank vibrated around them, familiar tremors running through the steel. The air changed, warmed differently. The gauges on Novak's panel sprang up, needles climbing into green ranges. "Yes," Novak whispered, almost reverent. "Yes, you beautiful monster. Welcome back." "Gunner, try your controls," Kincaid said. Ortiz's hands hovered over the grips. The main screen remained dark, but the manual reticle inside his backup sight flickered on with a faint glow. I've got day sight through backup," he said slowly. "No thermals. Turret power. Hang on, let me try." He moved the right hand control gently. The turret shuddered. Then it began to turn, sluggish but undeniable. "Turret drive is online," Ortiz said, wonder in his voice. "It's rusty, but it's there." "Not rusty," Kincaid said. "You're just bypassing a fried control module. Think of it like turning the steering wheel with one arm." He looked down. "Loader." Miller, grinning despite the tension, slapped the breech. "Main gun's clear. Auto loaders." He stopped, cheeks flushing. "Right. We don't have an auto loader. We have me. I'm clear and ready." Kincaid gave him a tiny nod. "Good. You keep that enthusiasm, kid. You'll need it when you're shoving sabot rounds into that breach while someone tries to erase you from the planet." He reached for the radio panel. The display stayed dead. "Comms are still gone," he muttered. "Our new friends, whoever they are, really did a number on the high-frequency stuff." "So we're back," Park said slowly, "but we're still alone." Kincaid's eyes hardened. "Better to be a lone wolf with teeth than a sheep in a flock, Lieutenant." Something thumped against the hull again. This time, it wasn't a friendly knock. "Driver, button up." Kincaid snapped. Novak's hatch slammed as something tinked off the armor above and skittered down. A second later, a third, smaller thud came from the front glacis. "Gunner, check forward sector," Kincaid ordered. Ortiz swung the turret manually, muscles straining against the stiffer-than-normal controls. The backup sight field of view swept across tan earth, scraggly bushes, and a thin, black shape streaking overhead low and fast, too small for a manned aircraft. Another right behind it. "Drones," Ortiz breathed. "Two of them. Small quadcopters, maybe. Coming from the east." "Explosive?" Miller asked. One of the drones banked hard, arcing toward them. Sunlight sparked off a small cylinder slung under its belly. "Probably," Ortiz said. "Driver, pivot steer us left," Kincaid barked. "Gunner, low ready. They hit us from above. They'll go for optics and vents." The tank lurched as Novak hauled at his controls. Even on partial power, 68 tons of armor responded with surprising grace, the hull swinging around to face the oncoming threat. The first drone dipped lower, rotors whining. It seemed absurdly fragile against the Abrams' bulk. A toy, a mosquito. Mosquitoes killed more humans every year than lions, Kincaid thought, not for the first time. "Loader," he snapped, "grab the Coke's ammo can. If that thing gets close enough, you hose it manually." Miller's eyes widened. "With the Cokes? But the triggers." "Your hands, my voice," Kincaid said. "We improvise." He pointed to a maintenance hatch near the coaxial machine gun's mount. "Pop that. Reach in. You'll feel the linkage. Like a stiff trigger. Don't shoot our own sight off." Miller scrambled up, fingers fumbling at the hatch latch. It swung open, revealing an oily assembly of rods and pivots. He found the one with a spring-loaded give and wrapped his hand around it. "I got it," he said. The first drone swept in, nose dipping as it angled for the commander's independent viewer and the cluster of sensors around it. "Gunner, short bursts." Kincaid snapped. Ortiz squeezed. The Cokes chattered to life, the tank shivering with the vibration. Bright tracers stitched the sky near the incoming drone, but the angle was bad, the target small. Rounds whipped past, tearing the air. The drone juked wildly, then dove. "Loader!" Kincaid shouted. Miller yanked the improvised trigger. The Cokes stuttered again, the burst slanting higher by sheer luck and panic. A tracer clipped one of the drone's rotors. The little machine spun in a drunken pirouette, its payload tumbling free. "Down!" Ortiz shouted. Something thumped the hull above and to the right. Dust sifted from overhead seams. No breach. No internal explosion. Second drone. Novak yelled. Ortiz swung the turret, but it was already too late. The second quadcopter zipped low, almost hugging the deck, then popped up in front of the Abrams bow like a hideous, mechanical bird. It rammed itself straight into the thick cage around the driver's periscopes. The explosion was sharp and bright, more noise than force. Novak yelped as the world in front of him turned into white static. "I've lost periscopes," he shouted. "No forward visibility." "Any hull breach?" Kincaid demanded. "Negative. Just blind." Miller let out a shaky laugh. "They're like gnats with grenades." "Gnats kill people with malaria," Kincaid said. "Stay sharp." The dust outside slowly settled. Through his backup sight, Ortiz swept the hills. "I don't see any more," he reported. "But if they've got eyes on us with those things, the main course is probably inbound." "My thought exactly," Kincaid said. "Driver, turn us north. There's a drainage ditch about 500 meters from here, the scouts reported earlier. That'll give us a bit of hull down." "How do you know that?" Park asked. "Our digital maps are down." "Because I make paper ones," Kincaid said. "Because paper doesn't crash." He pulled a folded, creased map from his breast pocket and handed it to Park. Pencil markings scribbled along contour lines, annotated with notes and arrows. "You been out here?" Park asked, surprised. 2 weeks, Kincaid said. "Running around in light vehicles, watching you heavy boys kick the anthills." His mouth twisted. Some of the ants kicked back. The tank lurched forward, tracks grinding over loose rock and dried earth. Without the usual hum of functioning electronics, without the chatter of the battle net, the interior felt oddly quiet despite the turbine's roar. "Sir," Park said finally, "if this is some kind of electronic attack, why did our tank die completely, but you were moving around just fine out there?" Kincaid's gaze stayed on Ortiz's sight repeater, which flickered faintly with the backup feed. "Who says our tank died because of them?" Park blinked. "What?" "EMP, localized jammers, drone-borne microwave emitters. Those are all guesses. Maybe accurate, maybe not." Kincaid tapped the panel he'd bypassed. "But this is deliberate. Hard cut on power routing. Software choke point." "I thought you said Lightning did something similar in Iraq," Ortiz said. "Lightning doesn't flip one specific breaker with that kind of precision," Kincaid replied. "Or lock hatches with electromagnets built into the armor. That's a feature someone added after my time. A safety protocol. So if the system decides something is too dangerous, it locks you in and shuts you down." Miller stared. "Wait, you're saying our own tank tried to, I don't know, put us in timeout?" "I'm saying somebody wrote code that says under X conditions, kill all power and immobilize the crew for their own good." Kincaid's lips tightened. "I'm also saying somebody else found a way to make those conditions trigger at the worst possible time." "You think we were hacked," Park said, slowly. "I think," Kincaid said, "that when you build a war machine too reliant on being part of a network, you hand an enemy a big, shiny off switch, and you better pray they don't figure out which wires to cut." "Can they do it again?" Novak asked. "To us? To the rest of the company?" "They already did it to you once," Kincaid said. "Your buddies? If they were as plugged in as you were, I'd bet good coffee they felt something similar." The thought hit Park like a physical blow. Hammer 2, Colonel Jacobs, the brigade. If the whole grid is compromised, they'll be trying to reboot, too, Kincaid said. "Difference is, most of them never learned how to drive the tank when it's half brain dead. Then we're the only active Abrams in the area," Ortiz realized. Kincaid gave a curt nod. "Which makes us both screwed and important." "Important how?" Miller asked. "You ever hear the phrase center of gravity in a briefing?" Kincaid asked him. Yeah, they use it for everything. The enemy's center of gravity. The population's. My attention spans. Everyone talks about center of gravity like it's metaphysical," Kincaid said. "In reality, it's simple. What's the one thing, if you break it, everything else collapses?" "Our tanks." Novak guessed. Kincaid shook his head. "Information. Trust. You compromise communications in a modern task force. You don't have to beat them with firepower. They'll beat themselves with confusion and fear. You've seen this before," Park said. It wasn't a question. Kincaid's jaw worked. His eyes seemed to track something only he could see, somewhere a few decades behind them. In 91, he said slowly, most of the killing we did was one-sided. We'd spot silhouettes on the thermal sights at 3, for clicks, fire, and by the time the round hit, those poor bastards didn't even know we were there. He blew out a breath. But there was one night. The radios were a mess. Frequencies stepped on, garbled call signs. We had orders to punch through a breach in the minefields. Artillery going both ways. Smoke everywhere. Our blue-on-blue protocols were, let's say, not as robust as they are now. He glanced at them, gauging how much to say. We saw a shape on the horizon, he continued. Big, boxy. Turret shape looked wrong for T-72s. The thermal silhouette was fuzzy. Our battalion net was jammed. My commander thought it was an enemy command vehicle. He called it as such. We fired. 2 rounds, sabot. Both hit. Kincaid's voice dropped. They were friendlies. Another battalion, off course. 4 out of 4 crew died. Silence. I was a gunner then, Kincaid said. Just like you, Ortiz. I saw them blow apart. I saw the fire. The rest, I heard about later. Park swallowed. What happened after? The army buried it, Kincaid said flatly. They called it fog of war. They gave us a list of things to say in the debrief. They told us we'd done the best we could under the circumstances. He looked at his hands. Then they went and built systems to make sure it never happened again. Blue Force Tracker. Better IFF. More data from more decision makers. He looked up, eyes suddenly hard again. And now, some 20-odd years later, we've come full circle. Different tech, same vulnerability. You mess with comms and ID and people die. Sir, Ortiz said hesitantly, why are you telling us this now? Because whoever's pulling the strings here knows that history, Kincaid said. And they're using it. This isn't just about frying some tanks. This is about breaking trust in the system that was built after we killed our own. How do you know they know? Novak asked. Kincaid reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, scorched plastic shard. He held it up. It looked like part of a circuit board, burned around the edges. Faint printing showed on the back. Park squinted. What is that? Picked it up this morning off the wreck of one of our own recon vehicles, Kincaid said. It was hit by a drone cluster. Most of the electronics were slag, but this fragment survived. He turned it so they could see the stamped characters. Ortiz read them out loud. SABOT 91. He frowned. Like the ammo. Sabot. 91. Kincaid's mouth twisted. That was the call sign of the tank we killed in the Gulf. Sabot 91. Whoever fabricated this board deliberately labeled it with that. That's not a coincidence. That's a message. His hand closed around the fragment. Plastic creaked. Somebody wants me to know they remember. The tank rattled as Novak steered them down into the shallow drainage ditch Kincaid had mentioned. The hull settled into partial concealment. Only the turret and upper glassy visible. Wait, Miller said slowly. So someone hacked our whole network, is using our own fail-safes against us, is dropping drones with weird nostalgic labels for you, specifically, and we're the only tank that's actually back in the fight. Yep, Kincaid said. That's not creepy at all, Miller muttered. What do they want? Park asked. Revenge? Psychological warfare? If it were just me, they could have found easier ways, Kincaid said. A letter. A bullet. This. He gestured at the dead fields around them, the distant occasional boom. This is bigger. The message isn't just for me. It's for every headquarters in earshot. He took a breath. They want us to lose faith in our own toys. They want to prove that 1 good hack beats 10 good tanks. Who are they? Ortiz asked. A crackle of static burst from one of the dead radios. All 4 men jumped. Kincaid stiffened, hands snapping to the volume knob. The display remained dark, but the speaker hissed, spat, then resolved into a thin, distorted voice. Hammer, units, repeat, all hammer units, cease offensive operations and hold in place. Await remote reinitialization. Do not attempt manual bypass. Say again, do not. The message dissolved into noise. Is that brigade? Park asked hoarsely. Kincaid's lips thinned. Or someone pretending to be. The radio spat again. A second voice came on, this one lower, calmer. Kincaid, if you're out there, this is Ghost Dog. Stand down. You can't fix this one. The older man froze. Ortiz looked at Park. Ghost Dog. Kincaid's eyes had gone very, very cold. Driver, he said softly, kill the engine. Novak's hand hesitated on the lever. Sir, do it. The turbine wound down slowly, the tank's vibration fading. In the relative quiet, the ghost of the last voice still seemed to linger. Who was that? Park asked. Kincaid's gaze stayed locked on the dead radio for a long moment. Ghost Dog is a call sign I haven't heard since '91, he said finally. Belonged to my tank commander back then. Captain Harrow. He's here. Ortiz asked. Can't be, Kincaid whispered. He died 10 years ago. The hairs on Novak's arms prickled beneath his sweaty Nomex. So either someone stole his old call sign, or, Miller said carefully, that radio isn't receiving right. Maybe it's playing back. I don't know. Recorded messages? Glitched old traffic. Kincaid's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they were clear. Hard. Whatever that was, he said, we don't treat it as gospel. But if it's brigade, Park started. If it's brigade, they'll send couriers or aircraft to confirm their orders, Kincaid said. If it's not, and we sit still waiting for remote reinitialization like good little nodes in a compromised network, we're dead. Or worse, we're used. Used how? Novak asked. Kincaid took a breath. Imagine you're the enemy, he said. You've got control over when and where our systems reboot. Over which units hear which orders. You can make half a battalion suddenly think the other half are hostiles. Turn us against each other. Ortiz's stomach twisted. You think they do that? Never underestimate what people will do when they think the other guy is the threat, Kincaid said. We proved that ourselves 35 years ago. Park looked down at the map in his hands, then back at the dead radio. His training screamed at him to obey higher. His gut screamed something else. What's the alternative? He asked quietly. The alternative, Kincaid said, is we accept that we're not getting clean orders from anybody right now. So we generate our own mission. Which is? Novak asked. We find whoever's pulling that switch, Kincaid said. We take away their remote hand over our throats. Then we give the brass the truth, whether they like it or not. That's ambitious, Miller said. We're one tank. We're one tank that works, Kincaid said. That makes us more valuable than a dozen that don't. And we're not going to do it alone. You know where they are? Ortiz asked. Kincaid tapped the fragment of circuit board in his hand. They left breadcrumbs. Always do when they get cocky. That label? Sabo 91? That's not just a taunt. It's a reference. There's only one place in this theater where that code phrase shows up in any database. He looked at Park. Where's Brigade HQ? Park swallowed. Forward operating node Valor. 2 ridgelines over. West of the industrial zone. Who runs their cyber intel cell? Major Collins, last I heard. With liaison support from contractor side. Kincaid's mouth went tight. Name of the contractor? I don't know. Park admitted. Some defense firm stateside. I do, Kincaid said softly. Spectral Dynamics. How do you? Because last month I checked their recruitment page by accident, Kincaid said, and saw a familiar face on the leadership team. He pulled a crumpled paper from his pocket and handed it to Park. It was a printed page, creased and sweat-stained, showing a corporate headshot. The man in the photo was in his late 40s, with closely cropped hair and eyes that didn't quite match his polished smile. Dr. Nathaniel Cross, Park read, Director of Tactical Systems Integration, Spectral Dynamics. That's not his real name, Kincaid said. Not to me. To me, he's Specialist Cross. Loader, M1 Sabo 91, 2nd Armored Cavalry Regiment. My loader back in the Gulf. Ortiz blinked. Your loader? On the tank that? Yeah, Kincaid said. On the tank that killed our own people. Something like understanding dawned in Park's eyes. You think he blames you? He blames a lot of people, Kincaid said. Harrow, battalion, the army, the politicians, the system, maybe himself. But he's the smartest bastard I ever met who hated anything he couldn't control. His fingers tightened on the picture. If someone found a way to turn this battlefield into a laboratory to prove his point, it'd be him. You're saying your former loader is behind a hack that could turn our whole brigade against itself? Novak asked weakly. No offense, sir, but that sounds insane. So does labeling burn circuit board with a 30-year-old call sign just to rattle me, Kincaid said. And yet, he lifted the fragment. Here we are. Park stared at the picture at the dead radio at Kincaid. If you're wrong, he said, we're about to drive a tank toward our own brigade HQ under partial power and no comms, based on a hunch. If I'm wrong, Kincaid said, we get yelled at and maybe arrested for being overzealous. And if you're right? Ortiz asked. If I'm right, Kincaid said, then unless we cut the strings, someone's about to steer a lot of good people into killing each other. Nobody spoke. Finally, Park folded the paper, handed it back. You still have command of this tank, he said quietly. Tell us where to go. Kincaid nodded once. Driver, he said, bring the engine back up. When you crest that ridge, I want to be ready to fight whoever tries to stop us. Friend or foe. Novak hesitated only a heartbeat before reaching for the lever. The turbine whined to life again. Gunner, Kincaid continued, load Sabo. We might need surgical shots if we're forced to disable, not destroy. On it, Miller said, scrambling to grab the long, fin-stabilized, armor-piercing round. He shoved it into the breech with a grunt. Sabo up. Gunner Sabo, Ortiz echoed. Driver, move out, Kincaid said. We're going hunting. The approach to forward operating node Valor was eerily quiet. No artillery arcs in the distance. No steady rumble of other armored elements moving. Just the solitary roar of their own turbine and the crunch of tracks over dry, broken ground. As they crested the last rise before the node, Ortiz brought the sight up, scanning. Contact, he said immediately. Multiple vehicles around the perimeter. Humvees. MRAPs. Looks like some of our armored recovery vehicles, too. I see at least 3 Abrams in the motor pool. Active? Kincaid asked. Hard to tell. No visible movement. No exhaust plumes. They look like they're parked. Or dead. Any signs of fighting? Park asked. Ortiz swept. No smoke. No obvious craters near the command tents. Wait. He zoomed on a cluster of soldiers near the main TOC entrance. About a group of personnel. About 20. They are lined up. Lined up how? Kincaid asked. Single file, Ortiz said slowly. Hands on their heads. Guarded by another squad, weapons drawn. Miller swore softly. Jesus. Are they taking prisoners? Of their own people? Uniforms? Kincaid asked. Hard to tell at this range, Ortiz said. Same camo pattern on both groups. Could be different unit patches. Can't see clearly. Any hostiles? Novak asked. Enemy uniforms? Vehicles? Negative, Ortiz said. It's all ours. The nodes spread out below them. Rows of tents, clusters of vehicles, antenna masts poking at the sky. At the center, a larger tent with a camouflaged roof, the TOC. Its walls bulged slightly with the weight of equipment inside. Sir, Park said, if the hack hit them as well, some elements might think the others are compromised. They might be following containment protocols. That's technically within doctrine if they believe there's an internal threat. The problem, Kincaid said, is when two groups both think the other is the compromised one. So which one's right? Miller asked. From up here, Kincaid replied. No way to tell. A Humvee near the perimeter suddenly swung its gun turret toward them. They see us, Ortiz said. Turret's tracking. A moment later, a pop of smoke kicked out from the Humvee side mount. A green flare arced into the air, then blossomed into a puff of color. Signal? Novak asked. Could be challenge code, Park said. Could be halt or be fired upon. A crackle came from the radio again, startling them. Hammer 2-6, this is Node Valor. A voice barked, harried and tense. You are to halt immediately and power down. Repeat, halt and power down. Verify remote handshake and await reinitialization. The displays were still dark. The voice seemed to come from nowhere, hanging in the air. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. We don't have an active transmitter or receiver, Lieutenant. That voice is being injected directly into our internal speaker circuits. Doesn't mean it's real. Could we test it? Novak asked. Ow, say something back, Miller suggested. Kincaid sighed. Worth a shot. He leaned close to the dead radio. Node Valor, this is Hammer 2-6, he said. It felt odd, using their old designation now that they were effectively rogue. Our comms are compromised. Unable to verify handshake. Repeat, unable. Static swallowed his words, the speaker hissing like a snake. Then the earlier voice came back, smoother now. Hammer 2-6, it said, your platform is showing as unauthorized on the network. You are at risk of being misidentified as hostile by other nodes. For your safety, you must shut down immediately. Kincaid snorted. There it is. For your safety. Same phrase in the manual that locked your hatches. Maybe it really is brigade, Park argued weakly, trying to keep us from getting shot by other units. Other units that are also offline? Kincaid asked. I don't see any moving armor down there. Just confused grunts with rifles and orders they don't understand. What if they're waiting for us to obey orders as a test? Novak said, if we don't, they assume we're compromised and shoot us. Kid, Kincaid said gently, if they really thought we were compromised, we'd already be under javelin fire. He pointed. No launch signatures. Nobody's even taking a knee with a tube. That might change any second, Ortiz muttered. Kincaid thought for a heartbeat. Gunner, keep eyes on those Abrams in the motor pool, he said. Last thing we need is one of them coming online behind us. Roger, Ortiz said. Driver, advance slowly, Kincaid said. Let's see if they blink first. The Abrams crawled down the slope, engine rumbling. Dust billowed behind them. Another voice crackled over the bastardized interior speakers. This one was cooler, more precise. Familiar to Kincaid's ears. Track 17, it said. I know that's you. You always did have a problem with authority. Kincaid's fingers tightened on the grips. Well, Miller whispered. Who is it? Cross, Kincaid said. Park blinked. Your old loader? That's right. The voice continued, as if it had heard. Nice to see you adapt with the times. Most of your generation just retired and yelled at cable news. Is he talking directly to you? Ortiz asked. Looks like, Kincaid said softly. He swallowed, then forced his voice steady. Nathan, he said, you're a long way from the loader's hatch. A low chuckle crackled from the speaker. You think I clawed my way through grad school and DARPA contracts just to ride around in the hull forever? No, I prefer a different perch nowadays. Major Collins with you? Kincaid asked. Around, Cross said. She's useful. She believed the sales pitch. Battlefield resilience through distributed intelligence. A pause. She's upset with you right now, by the way. Being off-network makes her nervous. Being on-network makes us dead, Kincaid said. Only if someone's willing to pull the trigger, Cross replied. Or flip the switch. Funny thing about switches, Kincaid. They're just decisions wrapped in plastic and metal. Someone always makes the decision. Park leaned closer to the speaker. If you're compromising our systems, that's an act of treason, he said, voice shaking with anger. You're putting American lives at risk. Your own former unit. On the contrary, Cross said, I'm protecting them. In the long term, you don't cure a disease by hiding its symptoms. You expose them. You stress the system until the cracks show. Then you fix the right ones. You call this fixing? Novak demanded. You shut down our tanks. Our comms. You got soldiers pointing rifles at each other down there, and they don't even know why. I gave them prompts, Cross said calmly. I stripped away the pretty layers of certainty their systems fed them. Now they have to decide without the comforting glow of 1,000 screens telling them who's good and who's bad. Some will make the wrong call. They always do. But afterward, when the after-action reviews pile up and the bodies are counted, maybe the generals will finally understand what you and I saw in 91. Which is? Kincaid asked, voice hard. That adding more tech doesn't remove human error, Cross said. It just magnifies it, speeds it up, makes it harder to see until it's too late. So your solution is to make it worse on purpose? Ortiz asked incredulously. My solution, Cross said, is to demonstrate unequivocally that a network-centric force is only as strong as its least secure node. That giving over trust to opaque algorithms and remote oversight, people like me, creates vulnerabilities you can't paper over with doctrine. After today, no one will ever again be able to pretend this system is invincible. That's worth a few scars. A few scars, Miller echoed, disgusted. How many deaths does a scar cost, Nathan? Kincaid asked quietly. Cross was silent for a heartbeat. You tell me, he said finally. You had 30 years to count them. The words landed like a blow. This is about Sabo 91, Kincaid said. It's about what Sabo 91 represented, Cross said. We killed our own people because we trusted bad intel, bad comms, and a flawed op plan. And the institution decided the solution was more tech, more layers, more complexity. Bigger maps, glossier screens. They never addressed the human part, the accountability part. And your plan to force accountability is to hack your own side. Park demanded. That's insanity. I prefer intervention, Cross said. The enemy was already probing our systems, playing with drones, sniffing our networks. I saw their code. It was clumsy, but the intent was there. So I nudged things, gave them a few breadcrumbs, let them think they were getting lucky. In reality, I limited the scope. I prevented them from causing real strategic damage. And in exchange, I get to make my point to the people who matter. People are not pawns for your thesis, Kincaid said. Weren't we? Cross shot back. On that ridgeline in 91? When Harrow took that shot, do you think anyone up the chain cared about us as anything other than icons on a map? Kincaid's hand shook. I cared, he said. I know you did, Cross said. And for the first time, there was a hint of something softer in his voice. That's why I knew you'd come. When I saw your name on the advisor roster for this task force, I almost laughed. Fate has a twisted sense of humor. The tank rolled to a halt about 300 meters from the perimeter of Node Valor. Weapons on the ground tracked them warily, but no one fired. The soldiers near the HQ entrance had noticed the Abrams now. Some pointed, others shifted uncomfortably. Here's what's going to happen, Cross continued. You're going to shut down your tank. You're going to step out, unarmed. You're going to walk into the node and sit down with Major Collins and me. Then we're going to have a very adult conversation about doctrine, culpability, and the future of warfare. And if we don't, Kincaid asked. Then, Cross said, I flipped the switch again. On you, on the other Abrams down there, on every system still blinking on this grid. I can't guarantee I'll be able to control the downstream effects a second time. The others, they'll start shooting at ghosts. Literally. He chuckled mirthlessly. Imagine the headlines. You're bluffing, Park said. You think I'd come this far to bluff? Cross replied. Silence stretched inside the tank. Sir, Novak whispered, if he can hit us again, he could lock our turret while we're out here. Kill the engine. Turn us into a target for anybody with an AT-4 and a grudge. Or he's lying, Ortiz said, trying to scare us into walking into his den. Miller swallowed. What if he has a kill signal tied to our IFF? To anything that pings us as friendly? He could make our own air think we're hostiles. From his vantage point, Kincaid said slowly, he doesn't need to shoot us himself. He just needs to make someone else think they should. Then we should stand down, Park said, hating the words even as he spoke them. We go in, we talk, we stall. Let Hire sort him out. You really think Hire isn't part of this already? Ortiz muttered. The Major might not be, Novak said. She could be an unwitting accomplice, like he said. If we can reach her. Kincaid closed his eyes. 30 years ago, he'd sat in a different turret, under a different sky, listening to different confused voices on a different net. He'd watched a friendly tank burn because no one had the full picture, and those who were supposed to make the calls had made the wrong ones. Now he sat in another steel box, listening to a ghost from that night justify turning a battlefield into a classroom. He opened his eyes. If we step out of this tank unarmed, he said quietly, we give up the one piece of leverage we have. Our mobility, our firepower, our example. You think an example matters? Cross asked mildly. Always, Kincaid said. He looked at his crew, at the young faces turned toward him, dust-streaked and wary. You followed my lead when we were just trying not to die, he said. I'm about to ask you to follow it for something bigger. I won't order you. Not for this. If anyone wants out, say so now. I'll find a way to get you clear before we do something that'll be in history books. Sir, Novak said immediately. If we leave, who's driving? You need me. You need a gunner too, Ortiz said. And unless Miller suddenly learned to aim while I wasn't looking. Hey, Miller protested. We're in, Ortiz said. Miller sighed. Yeah, we're in. Somebody's got to keep you old guys from doing anything too stupid. Park swallowed. If this goes wrong, he said, we'll be the ones people blame. Probably, Kincaid said. Park took a breath. Then we make sure it goes wrong for the right reasons. Kincaid's mouth twisted. That's the spirit, Lieutenant. He reached for the control panel he'd bypassed earlier. Nathan, he said, you remember what Harrow told us the night before the breach? There was a pause. Be more specific, Cross said warily. He said, when in doubt, move toward the sound of your own conscience, Kincaid said. And then he laughed like it was a joke. I remember, Cross said. He wasn't exactly a philosopher. No, Kincaid agreed. So here's me, 30 years late, actually taking his advice. He flipped a switch. The tank's remaining systems rerouted with a faint hum. Kincaid had rigged a manual override, but there was one more thing he could do, one last bit of analog stubbornness in a digital war. He reached for the IFF control module and yanked it out completely, wires snapping. Inside the TOC, someone like Cross would see their tank disappear from the network map entirely. Not hostile, not friendly, just gone. Driver, Kincaid said. Advance. Slowly. We're going in. They rolled toward the node. Shouts rose from the perimeter. Rifles came up. A few soldiers scrambled for cover behind Jersey barriers. No one fired. Keep that main gun at low depression, Kincaid told Ortiz. Center on the TOC entrance. Do not, under any circumstances, light anyone up unless they fire first. And even then, aim to disable vehicles, not vaporize people. Yes, sir, Ortiz said tightly. Kincaid, Cross's voice crackled, sharper now. You just made yourself blind to the network. I can't protect you anymore. If another unit flags you as a threat, that's the thing about blind men, Kincaid said. We learn to listen to different things. The tank rolled to a stop 30 meters from the TOC entrance. Dust drifted around them in lazy clouds. The soldiers near the doorway had split into two distinct groups now, facing each other at an angle. On the left, a squad in 1st Brigade patches, weapons low but ready. On the right, another in attached cyber unit insignia, their leader gripping a tablet like a lifeline. Both groups looked terrified and angry. Ortiz's sight picked out a woman in the cluster near the doorway, talking rapidly into a handset. Shoulder boards glinted on her uniform. Visual on Major Collins, he reported. She's arguing with a tech guy. Aggressively. Good, Kincaid said. Maybe she's still got a spine. He popped the commander's hatch. Hot air slammed into him, smelling of dust, metal, and distant diesel. Shouts got louder. Rifles swung. Kincaid stood up slowly in the hatch, hands open. He didn't bring a sidearm. He didn't bring anything. Major Collins, he called over the engine noise. This tank is under my command. We're coming in to talk. You're going to want to listen. She whirled, eyes going wide as she recognized him. Sergeant Major Kincaid? What the hell are you doing? Being stubborn, he said. It's in my contract. Cross's voice hissed faintly from the dead speaker below, last remnants of connectivity clinging like cobwebs. This is a mistake, he warned. Maybe, Kincaid said under his breath. But it's ours. He glanced down into the turret. Park met his gaze, then gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. Keep her warm, Kincaid told him. If things go sideways, you protect yourselves. You owe me nothing beyond that. That's not how this works, Park said. You don't get to walk into the lion's den alone. We're crew. Miller grinned weakly. Yeah, sucks for you, sir. You're stuck with us. Fine, Kincaid said. But at least one of you stays with the tank, no matter what. I'll stay, Novak said quickly. Somebody has to babysit her. Gunner, load her with me, Kincaid said. Lieutenant, your call. Park hesitated, then clambered up. With you, he said. They dropped from the hull one by one, boots hitting the tarmac with dull thuds. Kincaid walked ahead, hands still open, feeling the weight of rifle barrels tracking him. Major Collins strode to meet them, jaw clenched. You picked a hell of a time to improvise, she snapped. Our net is compromised, half our vehicles are bricks, and you show up with a tank that somehow works. Funny how that happened, isn't it? Kincaid said evenly. Makes you wonder why. Her eyes flicked to the smoking, dead antenna array on the TOC roof. Our working theory is hostile cyber intrusion, aided by unknown internal vectors. She glared at him. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? I know who you should be questioning, Kincaid said. And I know he's in your TOC. Her eyes narrowed. Who? Dr. Nathaniel Cross, Kincaid said. Her expression didn't flicker. That told him enough. He's been instrumental in limiting the damage, she said carefully. Without his intervention, we'd be in far worse shape. Ma'am, Ortiz blurted, unable to hold back. With respect, that's like giving a guy credit for putting out a fire he started. Specialist Ortiz, Kincaid said quietly, zip it. You're here as a very handsome piece of background noise. Miller choked on a laugh, then coughed it down at Colin's glare. You have proof? She asked. Kincaid held up the circuit fragment. Start with this, he said. Then we'll go inside, and I'll show you how the failsafe that turned my tank into a coffin aligns perfectly with the code your contractor has been pushing for months. And while we're at it, we'll ask him why his malicious tags are referencing a friendly fire call sign from 1991. Her eyes dropped to the fragment, brows knitting. Sabo 91, she murmured. Why does that sound familiar? Because it's buried in a redacted after-action report in your brigade archive, Kincaid said. Page 23. Footnote. Look it up. She stared at him, then at the tank, then back at the fragment. You're telling me my lead cyber consultant is orchestrating a live-fire experiment on my brigade, using our own systems as test subjects, she said. Yes, ma'am, Kincaid said. And I'm telling you that if you don't confront him now, he's going to flip his switch again. As if on cue, a siren hooped once from inside the TOC. A harried tech sergeant stumbled out. Headset askew. Ma'am, he shouted. We just lost data link with track 17. Like it dropped off the map. And Ghost Dog is requesting priority access to the remaining fire control overlays. Colin's head snapped around. Ghost Dog. Call sign for the senior integration node, the sergeant said. Dr. Cross's workstation. Her gaze swung back to Kincaid. How long have you been off the net? She asked. Since about the time he realized I wasn't going to roll over, Kincaid said. He can't see us. He can't kill our power remotely. That scares him. A distant rumble sounded overhead. All of them looked up. Two dark shapes were cutting low and fast across the sky, engines humming. Attack helicopters. Friendly by their silhouettes. They banked slightly, their sensor turrets swiveling. Whose birds? Kincaid asked sharply. Ours, Collins said. But their targeting overlays run through the same network. If someone misflags your tank as hostile, she didn't have to finish. One more switch, Kincaid said. One more decision wrapped in plastic and metal. Collins' jaw tightened. Tech Sergeant, lock Ghost Dog out of the overlay. Now, ma'am, he's already in, the sergeant said, pale. He's requesting authority to sanitize compromised nodes. Sanitize. Park repeated. Destroy. Kincaid translated. Collins swore. Follow me. All of you. They plunged into the TOC. Inside, the air was cool and stale with recycled AC, humming electronics, and too many bodies. Screens lined every wall, most of them filled with error messages, static, or blank maps. A few still showed icons, units, hazards, drone feeds. They flickered as if unsure how real they were allowed to be. At the far end of the tent, standing in front of a bank of consoles, was a man Kincaid recognized even before he turned. Same eyes as the photo. Same slight tilt to his head when he concentrated. A few more lines around the mouth, a bit more gray at the temples, but undeniably the same. Cross, Kincaid said. Nathaniel Cross turned. For a heartbeat, the years fell away, and Kincaid saw him as he'd been in the loader's hatch of Sabo 91. Younger, leaner, grinning around a cigarette, eyes too sharp and too old for his age. Track 17, Cross said softly. I was wondering when you'd get here. The nearest screen showed a map of the node. Their tank was absent, a blank spot where it should have been. Other icons blinked uncertainly. A warning dialogue floated over the map. Conflicting IFF data. Override. Nathaniel, Collins said, voice sharp. Sergeant Major Kincaid is alleging that your code triggered the lockdown that bricked our armor. Cross's gaze flicked to her, then back to Kincaid. Alleging, he repeated. That's a polite word. Kincaid, Collins said, tell me exactly what you did to get your tank moving again. He did. He described the manual overrides, the analog bus, the power routing. As he spoke, he watched Cross, whose expression betrayed no surprise. When I bypassed the module, Kincaid concluded, the tank stopped recognizing remote over-the-air commands, including the full power shutdown that hit us in the first place. Collins looked across. Is that possible? Cross sighed, as if put upon by the need to explain something obvious. Every system we field has fail-safes, he said. Some of them you know about. Some of them you don't, because they're classified or because if we told every driver and gunner about every backdoor and override, we'd never get anything done. Did you install a remotely triggered full power shutdown? Collins asked coldly. Yes, Cross said, under direction from higher, to prevent a compromised vehicle from being used against us. Compromised how? Kincaid demanded. By whom? By anyone with the ability to physically capture or infiltrate a tank, Cross said. Local forces, insurgents, foreign actors. The initial threat model didn't include our own systems being used by one of our own. That was my addition. And today? Collins asked, who did you use on? He gestured at the chaotic screens. Everyone, he said simply. The word hung in the humming air. You took down your own brigade combat team, Collins said slowly. I forced a controlled failure, Cross said. The alternative was an uncontrolled one, sooner or later. The enemy was learning. They would have done something similar eventually, but with far more lethal consequences. This way, it happens on our terms under my supervision. With limits. Limits. Ortiz burst out. People are out there with weapons pointed at each other. And no one has fired yet, Cross said, because their data feeds are incomplete, because I throttled their targeting information, because I refused to let them have the false certainty that leads to rash engagement. He looked at Kincaid. You taught me that in a way. On that night, if you'd had less information, no fuzzy silhouette at all, you might have hesitated. You might not have taken a shot. We fired because we thought we knew enough, Kincaid said. We didn't. The mud on that map was on us, not on the tech. People made the wrong call. Exactly, Cross said. And they walked away. They told you it was the fog of war and promoted the ones who wrote the cleanest justifications. None of them were held truly accountable. So I built something they can't ignore. He tapped the screen. The override dialogue flickered. The system is asking me a question, he said. Are these nodes hostile? Are they compromised? Should I sanitize them? I can say yes or no. His finger hovered over the yes option. You do that, Collins said tightly. And I will personally see you court-martialed, stripped of your clearances, and locked in a cell for the rest of your life. You might, Cross said, if there's a system left that can do more than blink error at you. Kincaid, Collins snapped, talk him down. Nathaniel smirked faintly. She thinks you're my conscience. I think you're a scared kid still stuck on a ridge in 1991, Kincaid said. Cross's jaw ticked. Don't patronize me. I'm not, Kincaid said quietly. I'm saying I get it. I've spent 3 decades waking up at night, seeing that other tank burning, wondering if I could have done something different, if I'd argued harder, if I told Harrow no. You were a gunner, Cross said. It wasn't your call. That's what they told me, Kincaid said, and I let that be enough. I salved my conscience with I was just doing my job. I let the system absorb it. You didn't. You took that guilt and you sharpened it until it could cut through anything. He gestured at the screens. You cut through the chain of command, through fail-safes, through common sense. Someone had to, Cross said. Maybe, Kincaid said. But tell me something, Nathan. When you labeled that board Sabo 91, who was that for? The generals? The doctrine writers? Or was it just for me? So you could prove to yourself that you were still the only one who really understood what happened that night. Cross's fingers tightened on the console edge. You owe them more than this, Kincaid said. The 4 in that tank. You don't honor them by making more ghosts. You don't fix a system that treats people like expendable icons by turning those people into instruments for your point. He stepped closer, voice low. You want accountability? I'm right here. You wanted me to see what you could do? I see it. I'll testify. I'll drag every ugly scrap of that after-action out into the light with you. We can make them look. We can make them listen." Cross's eyes were flat. "And when they pat you on the head and tell you it was all in the fog of war again, when they build another shiny system with new acronyms, then we break that one too," Kincaid said. "Together, loudly, with signatures on open letters, not with hack kill switches, with whistleblower protections, not with dead kids in the dirt." He swallowed. "I'm tired of ghosts, Nathan," he said. "I don't want Sabo 91 to be the first chapter in a long book of disasters. Let it be a footnote. Help me make it that." Cross stared at him. The room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, faintly, rotors thumped as the attack helicopters banked again. On the screen, the override dialogue continued to blink patiently. Yes or no? Sanitization or restraint? Finally, Cross exhaled a long, shuddering breath. "You always did know how to make a speech," he said softly. Kincaid snorted. "You're confusing me with Harrow." "No," Cross said. "Harrow made jokes. You make promises." He closed his eyes. His finger moved. It pressed an O. The dialogue vanished. The icons on the map flickered, then stabilized, shifting subtly as data routes rerouted. A few new ones appeared, green friendlies, blinking into clarity. A message popped up. Remote override denied. System failsafe disengaged. Outside, the sound of rotors changed pitch as the helicopters. Ortiz's voice crackled over Kincaid's still-dead headset, like a ghost call through static. "Sir, the birds just turned. They're banking away from us. No weapons lock. Perimeter guys are standing down, too. I think we're off their hit list." Collins sagged visibly, tension draining from her shoulders. Then she straightened, eyes like stone. "Nathaniel Cross," she said, voice formal. "You are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. You are confined to quarters pending investigation. Hand me your access token." Cross rolled it between his fingers, a slim, black card with embedded circuitry. He looked at Kincaid. "This won't fix anything," he said quietly. "They'll still build systems. They'll still trust them more than people." "Maybe," Kincaid said, "but at least now they know those systems can bleed. Thanks to you. That was your point, wasn't it?" Cross's mouth quirked in a bitter half-smile. "Remind them that the starships can fall," he said. "Yeah," Kincaid said. "Now help us teach them how to land without killing everybody aboard." Cross placed the token in Collins' waiting hand. As MPs moved in to escort him, he paused beside Kincaid. "You were never just doing your job," he said quietly. "Neither was I." "I know," Kincaid said. "Do you?" Kincaid met his gaze. "I'm starting to." Cross nodded once, as if that answer was enough for now. Then he let the MPs lead him away. Collins turned to Kincaid. "You realize this is going to blow up in ways we can't predict," she said. "Congress, media, courts, every armchair general with a podcast is going to have opinions." "Good," Kincaid said. "They should. Better that than another investigation buried in a classified annex." She huffed. "You really are a pain in my ass, Sergeant Major." "Part of the service," he said. Ortiz's voice sounded in his ear again, clearer this time as some internal connection grudgingly flickered back. Sir," he said. "Not to interrupt the big moral moment, but the tank says it wants to talk to you." Kincaid blinked. "The what?" "Some of the systems just popped back online," Ortiz said. "We're getting new messages. Software updates. Status reports. And a notification that our remote failsafe has been permanently disabled pending review." Collins glanced at the near screen. Sure enough, a new log entry was scrolling. "Global remote power-off function suspended by brigade command." "Well," she said dryly, "that was fast." "Bad news travels fast," Kincaid said. "Good news needs a push." He headed for the exit, Park, Ortiz, and Miller falling in behind him. Outside, the air smelled somehow different. Still hot, still dusty, but there was a faint sense of something loosening, like a knot pulled one thread too tight, finally easing. The soldiers near the entrance watched them warily, then with growing curiosity. Whispered snippets drifted on the breeze. "That's the tank that kept moving." "Old guy from the advisory team." Heard he hacked his own Abrams. Miller grinned. We're going to be legend. We're going to be in debriefs for the next 6 months, Park muttered. Same thing, Miller said. They climbed back onto the tank. Novak poked his head out of the driver's hatch, relief playing on his face. You're alive, he said, and nobody's on fire. I'll take it. Any more drone friends? Kincaid asked. None yet, Novak said. Just a lot of people staring at us like we're the weird kid at prom. Ortiz dropped back into his seat, running hands over the now active controls. We've got full power back, he said. Thermals, main sight, everything. Even fancy helmet overlay stuff. Comms are partially restored. I'm seeing a new authentication handshake being pushed brigade-wide. New locks for the old doors, Kincaid said. Let's hope they're smarter this time. Park slid into the commander's seat, then paused. Kincaid remained half standing in the hatch, one hand on the edge. Sir, Park said, you still have command? Kincaid considered. You're the assigned tank commander, he said. I hijacked your war. Time to give it back. Park's mouth opened, then closed. I don't know if I'm ready to. You just stared down a rogue systems architect and walked into a compromised HQ with a live tank behind you, Kincaid said. You're ready. He reached down and gently set the headset back on Park's shoulders. For the record, Park said, voice quiet, I'd follow you again. Kincaid smiled faintly. For the record, I hope you don't have to. He looked down into the turret at the men who had, in the span of a few hours, gone from stranded crew to something else. Something larger. You boys did good today, he said. You kept your heads when everything you trusted went dark. Remember that next time the screen lies to you. Next time, Novak groaned. Can we not have a next time? Sorry, kid, Kincaid said. In my experience, there's always a next time. He slid back into the turret one last time, savoring the cramped familiarity, the hum of systems, the smell of metal and sweat and oil. Where to now, LT? He asked. Park looked at the map overlay flickering in his display, at the icons stabilizing, at the new messages starting to scroll in. Brigade wants us to do damage assessment near the industrial belt, he said. They're worried some of the local militia might have gotten their hands on our tech while we were offline. So we go clean up the mess, Kincaid said. Yeah, Park said. But this time, we're bringing paper maps. Kincaid chuckled. Now you're thinking like a dinosaur. Park's hands settled on the commander's controls. Driver, he said, move out. The Abrams rumbled forward, alive once more, hauling its scars and stories with it. As they crested the ridge on their way back toward the broken industrial skyline, Kincaid looked out over the desert. The sky here didn't burn like Kuwait's had. There were no oil wells screaming fire, but the air still shimmered with heat and uncertainty. He thought of Sabo 91, of the names he still knew by heart, of Cross, walking between MPs with his head high and his eyes haunted, of young soldiers pointing rifles at each other because a voice on a speaker told them to. He thought of a tank that had died in the field and then refused to stay dead. Beside him, Ortiz hummed under his breath some tuneless thing. Miller tapped a rhythm on the ammo rack. Novak cursed quietly as the terrain threw another surprise at the tracks. Park called out headings with growing confidence. The war would go on. The tech would get shinier. The acronyms would multiply. But inside a steel box, some things would stay the same. Hands on controls, eyes on sights, hearts beating too fast and too hard. Kincaid rested his palm against the turret wall. Let's make sure the next story they tell about this machine, he murmured, so quietly only the Abrams could hear, is about the people who remembered how to drive it when the lights went out. Outside, the desert sprawled ahead, full of dust and danger and possibilities. The tank rolled on.